begins in 3, 2, 1.
Good morning, good evening, good night. Welcome to College Lacrosse Live. I'm Coach Q. This is Zack Capozzi. We are having ourselves a nice little day here. Hopefully, before the storms roll in, we can get you an hour-long show here talking about this weekend of College Lacrosse. Appreciate y'all joining us live. Zack, what's up, dude? What's happening?
Yeah, I'm like watching the radar. Hopefully, we can get through this before power cuts out.
If we cut out, it wasn't us. It was just that the power line completely fell off in one neck of our woods. We're kind of close to each other. So anyways, yeah, I mean, hopefully that doesn't affect any games. I don't think any – actually, we do have a game today.
Q's tonight.
We have some Q's. I don't think they're going to be affected by this storm. Let me make sure. Who's Q's playing tonight? Denver.
I think they're out on the West Coast. I think they're in Denver.
They are in Denver. I did see a post from Syracuse in the snow on their spring break trip. I'm sure they love that. Denver shot 14 shots their entire game against Ohio State on Thursday. We're going to touch on that game as we kind of get through the top 20 media poll. But anything happened this weekend, Zack, before I jump into some D3 grit that stood out to you, man? I know I want to give you the stage a little bit and wonder what's going on this weekend for you.
Yeah, it was funny because I had some questions from people about like games where teams won when scoring less than 7 goals. Like I think that was what happened in that Ohio State Denver game, and I was like shockingly many. You know, there was like 7 or 8, but it was funny because I did the analysis and then the thing spit out like and a lot of Bryant games. You know, so it's like there's quite a few, but many Bryant games for some reason.
The old Bryant zone. You love to hear. Just a quick shout out there. All right, we got some comments early. We're gonna try to get you the Saturday episodes. Just coming back. I know we haven't done it in a few weeks just because it hasn't worked out, but we've been able to knock these out, man. And Zach's been doing a great job. So appreciate you guys showing up live. Give some love to Lax Reference here. I got the newsletter in the description. I'm going to try to pull this up as well. We got fancy dancy QR codes. Let me see. We were working on this last time. Check out the QR code, top corner. I like, let me know if that even works.
2026. Man, what a world.
That's where we're at.
I'll shout out to that Towson comment right now. They're at 68% to get the top seed in the CAA. So, you know, I think they've locked in a top 4. So they're like one of the few teams that's kind of sitting pretty for conference tournament play.
Yeah, we got washed up Lax fan Towson title to lose raw JK, but I really think this is the most wide open year in recent memory. That was kind of the talk coming into the season. And I was like, oh, no, Maryland might run, just go undefeated and take it. Well, Maryland did win this weekend. They haven't been as dominant as I thought. But, again, wide open year. I love to see it. The parity's on display. We do also have another comment from JJ Pro. Q's versus Denver is going to be a dogfight. What's the prediction say here for the Q's Denver game, Zach? We've got that tilt tonight.
Q's is at about 71%. 72% to win. But this is one where, clash of styles, but like I have a model that compares like what the public perception of like the over-under is compared to what the model says over-under is projected to be. And in games like this where you have that like great offense and great defense, I mean, the model says like is expecting 23 goals. I think the over-under right now is like 20. So you don't see a lot of that's like the biggest gap in terms of the total number of any of the games that are listed right now. So the model thinks this is not going to be a rock fight.
I want to see what. Let me go into Denver's schedule. Has any game gone over 20 goals on Denver's schedule? Let's see.
Good
Cleveland State, they beat Cleveland State 20-1. Air Force was 10-2. Utah was 8-7. Cornell scored 13 on them.
Yeah.
And then Michigan, they beat 15-9. So look, the offense is in there as well. I mean, you're scoring 15 against a Michigan team that put up a little bit of a fight against Notre Dame this weekend.
Yeah, that nobody against Denver has cracked 20% adjusted offense. So that'll be the challenge for Q's. Can they be the first team to get over 20%? Which, I mean, honestly, like let's see. So far, their worst game was Princeton at 22%. So clash of styles. We'll see.
Yeah, it's my fault, honestly. Like I should be watching more Denver games. I think there's a couple on ESPN Plus, but I would love to see the game that they played against Ohio State this weekend, which I don't pay for Big Ten Plus. Shoot me, I just don't. There was 13 shots and 11 shots taken, and this was like deep into the third quarter. It's just like, what is happening in those games? Like, is the defense that stifling that you're only taking that many shots? Anyways, we'll touch on some of those games as we kind of get through. We wanted to give some love to some D3 grit. There was a lot of conversation early in the season about growing the game, the schedule, the moving around, the bubbles where nobody's able to watch. Well, the Mustang Classic is like something that I think we should cherish, right?
Yeah.
When you bring that many teams in together, I think the D1 should think about that, to be honest. But we did see the Mustang Classic here this weekend. It looked like we were going to have a really nice, weekend here for CNU, right? CNU right down the road from me. I actually work with a dude who went to CNU a few years ago. And, they were one of the losers on this weekend. Tufts, a big winner, going undefeated here. Also, a couple upsets, Lynchburg upsetting CNU. And then Lynchburg themselves getting upset by Gettysburg. So really good stuff, man. I mean, to have this amount of ranked teams playing, I think all the teams besides Denison and Stevenson were ranked. So this was a really cool weekend. Anything that you have for the Mustang Classic here?
It was just funny to think. I mean, like, and I'm not to say that the later games were a letdown, but like, that first one, Lynchburg and CNU, that was like, I think it was 22-21. And, the defensive purists in the audience did not necessarily enjoy that game.
Punch in air.
But like, it was an awesome way to start it, and it was just I do think you're right. Like, I can't imagine like what people were thinking there, sitting there in the stands, being like, that was the first game. We've got 8 to go. Like, and again, it's not like every game was that good, but what a way to start that. What a way to start that weekend.
Yeah, I got a comment on my Instagram that I reposted. It was basically saying like, this is penance for the Denver Ohio State 6-4 game. It's just restoring balance to the universe. Yes, 43 goals. Sorry, I was off one. 43 goals. If you took the under, you got obliterated in this one early. But yeah, Lynchburg taking down CNU in one of the higher scoring games that I've seen in a while, 22-21. And then the next day, CNU got boat raced by Tufts, and CNU sitting there at number 2 in the polls, and just it wasn't even close. I think I read the report and it was saying something to the effect of like 15 of 17 goals in the second half straight for Tufts, and they just pulled away and really separating themselves. Obviously, good on Lynchburg, but then they came back on Saturday and lost that game. D3 poll will be very interesting to see. Because again, CNU beat Gettysburg, so where does the D3 poll land? It will be interesting to see that.
Yeah, they were, and it's people are gonna laugh at this. Like, I ran my Tufts, like, they didn't play a lot of games, so they had been kind of a little bit farther down the polls, and people are like, if Tufts isn't number 1, they just refuse to believe that the poll is worthwhile. Let me just pull it up real quick, because I want to if we've got any Babson fans in our audience, they're gonna go crazy. But like, the current computer poll for D3 is now Babson 1, Tufts 2. So on the one hand, like, Tufts, yes, like, there's no reason to think they're not the number 1 team in the country. Nothing. I would
bet my life on it.
Babson has had quite a good start. They've got a lot of good wins, But I do like, so on the one hand, you're like, okay, finally, Tufts is asserting themselves. I can stop having people chirp at me about Tufts being 8 or 9 in the poll. But then you've got CNU. They were 2, I think, last week, and so they dropped a little bit. But it's yeah. I mean, I think it's hard to say like Tufts is going to win the whole thing. It's hard to say they're not going to, but we're so far away. So many things can happen, but it does feel a little bit like the universe is kind of asserting itself in that world.
Yeah, it's telling us what likely will happen. You see that in D3 sometimes. You get to the end and you get some blowouts there.
Right.
Yeah, I mean Bowdoin. Shout out Bowdoin there. I wonder what their ranking will be. I mean, in the computer ranking here, above Salisbury. That's the first time I've seen that in quite some time. So yeah, we gotta look D3 grit, man. We're doing it. We're doing it here for you guys. So appreciate you guys joining us for some early Mustang Classic news. But yeah, I love that tournament, man. I really hope that kind of bleeds over and maybe we do like a little face-off classic that we used to have in D1, especially with all the bullshit that we dealt with earlier in this year. But anyways, let's get into the D1 media poll here that just came out from Inside Lacrosse. We're also going to cross-reference that with a lot of the bracketology that Zach does here with Lax Reference. But the first game that we will cover is the number 1 team in the land, Notre Dame.
Now they're still in their man.
Yago against Tominovic. Yago on the question mark provides the exclamation. Josh Yago, what an incredible story. A transfer from Air Force. He is still technically active duty military while at Notre Dame. His graduate year is considered his military job, and when Notre Dame travels to away games, he has to use his military leave, and upon graduation, he'll join the Space Force full-time.
It's a young man who went to Air Force.
Space Force call out here for Josh Yago. My man is in the Space Force and playing at Notre Dame. This team's stacked, man. This offense is got killers everywhere, and they just took care of Michigan. I mean, the defensive side obviously holding Michigan to 4 is big time. Michigan just doesn't have the guys, it seems like right now, where you can kind of like count on them. But I'm interested in what the data shows. But again, Notre Dame just showing that they're the number 1 team in the land. Josh Yago having 3 points. Behrman leading Notre Dame with 4. 2-2.
That's like for Notre Dame, right? The offense was great, right? They started out really hot, and this is 2 straight games they've been under 10. So is that when you still win by 5 goals because the defense just totally clamped down on Michigan, maybe that's not a worry. But they in the 2 March games they're at 30%. They were at 42% in over 4 February games. So it's if they go and lose a game over the next couple of weeks, I think it's probably going to be, oh wow, the offense just really didn't show up. So it's again hard to nitpick when your defense scores allows only 4 goals, but there's a little bit of a red flag there up from the Irish offense.
Yeah, we've got them obviously coming in at number 1 here. They are off this week, so they are just taking a true spring break here. As far as the stats from the game, I mean, the goalie play was phenomenal. I think the face-off play was kind of split, if I can remember. Let's go into that. Yeah, the goalie play, 73% for Riccardelli, and Taylor for Michigan had 65%. So a phenomenal display of goalie play on both sides. Our boy Tay Rodriguez going 50% here, but Diaz Matos and Wellner, who actually takes the majority of Michigan's faceoffs, not doing as well. So Notre Dame having a little bit of an advantage there on the faceoff. But it came down to defense, as it feels like this year, Zach, and I don't know if you can put any thought into this maybe over this week and come back next Monday, but I always love the push and pull with football, where you have this is a very offensive laden season, right. Or this is a very defense is dominating. It feels like a defensive dominated season right now. I don't know what that is about, but it just feels that way when you get scores like this. You're not getting a ton of big time scores. It feels like
it's interesting because the 3 top defenses from an adjusted efficiency perspective right now is Denver, Ohio State, and Duke. Not necessarily the 3 most heralded teams this year, right? I mean, people are asking tons of questions about Duke. I feel like we put to rest the Ohio State Bobby Van Buren stuff at this point. But like
Yes.
Denver is a great defense, but they keep coming up on the losing side of some of these games. So, and then you've got on the flip side, and maybe this could easily just be something where offense gets the glory, right, and defense is the one that actually drives it. Like, you've got Harvard, somewhat of a darling this year, Richmond, somewhat of a darling. Notre Dame is the third-rated offense this year. So maybe it's just the perception around, we like offense, and that's why those teams are the ones that are getting the glory. But I think in terms of vibes, right, it's definitely been an offensive-driven season. The really good defenses are not the ones that are getting all those accolades at this point.
It's fair. It's a good point. As always, Zach's deflating my defensive bubble here. All right, that's fine. JJ, Big Ten Plus is all we can get in the UK. We can't watch any of the ESPN games, unfortunately. That sucks. There's a ton of games on the ESPN Plus. That's the majority where I'm seeing mine. But there's some good lacrosse played on Big Ten Plus. So, yeah.
Can we just note the fact that 50% of our live audience is foreign?
Is that?
Do
you have the demographic?
Like, great. We're reaching all corners of the world here with this podcast.
Yeah, that's why I say good morning, good evening, good night. Can't wait for Duke to actually play some competition. Oh, look, I talked with Quint Kesnick. That episode is coming out tomorrow for the Ride podcast. It should be a good one for you guys to listen to. Quint was also on the Duke kind of hate train here, which Zach is not. Zach is he's drawing the line in the sand. This is where this is the hill that he's dying on, is that Duke is actually playing a little bit of a tough schedule here. So I guess let's dive into Duke. I didn't have him on the schedule, but let's talk Duke here, Zach. What's up?
The 12-year-old Maryland fan in me growing up in Baltimore does not necessarily love having to rally to Duke's defense every week. But so this is basically looking, and again, RPI is going to shift dramatically over the course of the season, right? So this is kind of a snapshot of where we're at right now. But I think the key one to point out is that better wins than section down at the bottom, right? If you look at the RPI of the teams that Duke has beaten, they've got better collective wins than Ohio State, Army, Harvard, BU, right? Like they've got a top 10 win in St. Joe's. And, you could look at that and say, well, there's no way St. Joe's is going to stay a top 10 victory. But there's a 15% chance at the end of the season that St. Joe's has a top 10 RPI. Like, I just think we'd love to look at these games and say, but you've got these teams. Utah's almost a top 20 RPI. Like there's, let me look at Utah, right? There's a 23% chance that that's a top 20 RPI win at the end of the season.
So what I'm hearing from this is that they haven't hurt their RPI by playing a really, really poor team. Whereas you see some of these teams where they schedule maybe a tough ACC opponent, but then a couple weeks later they're playing the 50 or 60th RPI. That's what I hear when you say this stuff.
Yeah, and again, I think people really, yes, Duke has not. They have not shot themselves in the foot with anybody really bad. The teams that they've played, let me pull them back up. The teams that they've played are all generally going to have fairly decent RPIs. But I think the other thing with Duke is they have no losses. I think people just really underestimate how hard it is to go and win every week, right? Because you look at Penn State, that's the flip side of this. I mean, the Penn State victories at the top, they've got a victory over the number one RPI team, right? 13, 16. But, then they've got those losses. So it's it's not only about beating great teams. I think there's an element of when you can be consistent and you can go out there and just not have any letdowns and not have those bad days, that's worth something too. And that's a big part of the push and pull with the committee is do we care about bad losses? Do we only care about good wins? And, I think historically they've cared about both. And so, I think that's why you look at Duke's resume right now and, you look at the teams who their wins actually do tabulate as better than, it's teams that, no one's talking about whether Harvard is in line for a home game. Of course they are. People are probably thinking they might be one of the top seeds. Richmond in the same boat. But, there's nothing about Duke's schedule that screams cupcakes. I mean, Providence is their worst victory. And that's almost that's a team that is 42 in the RPI, and could very easily end up being, maybe not Providence, but like, a lot of these teams have the shot to be in that top 20. And then of course Duke's going to have their ACC schedule. So, yes, I mean, have they played like a team where you're like, that's a Final Four potential team? They have not.
No.
But they're going to, right? And so I think it's just like this early season schedule is not a cupcake in the same way that some of these other teams are. And you look at those 5 down there, and Duke's got better wins than they do.
This is a really fascinating discussion, and depending on how their schedule kind of plays out, and let's look at that, by the way, let me pull that up. Depending on how their schedule plays out here, this is going to be an absolutely just huge conversation. I should just say that's going to be around Duke's schedule, because there's a lot of people that are taking both sides, right? I'm sure there's a ton of people that like you, Zach, are going to be saying, look, like the balance of their RPI and strength of schedule is strong here.
Mm-hmm.
And then some people are going to say, well, they didn't play that tough, tournament team. And it's just going to be a really interesting debate. But the good thing is they can prove everybody right or wrong here there's no easy game remaining on the schedule. Denver, Syracuse, Virginia, Cornell, Notre Dame, North Carolina. I mean, that's it, right? Yep. They've entered ACC play, and we get to, well, I guess they don't enter it this week, but you get what I mean. Yeah. So they got out of conference with Denver and Cornell, and they've got those ACC games. It's going to be fascinating to watch them, man.
Yeah, and I think it's like now is the time that we lay the groundwork that like all wins matter, all losses matter. Like I hate the conversation. It's just like, let's only look at the teams that they played in the top 20 of the RPI and judge their resume based on that. Like, let's say St. Joe's ends up as the number 21 team in the RPI. Like that is literally almost not different at all from them being a top 20 victory. And, sometimes the discourse says, oh, well, we fell off of the top 20. You don't exist anymore, which is silly.
That I can agree with you on wholeheartedly, sir. That 20 to 21 is so arbitrary. It should take into account a lot of this other pieces. Right. But we got a ton of other games to get to. Richmond kind of had the week off here with Delaware. I hate to say that. Delaware's been a strong program for decades. They've always been like a really, really strong opponent there, but just having a down year here. But 17-5, Richmond over Delaware. They are the number 2 team in the poll. And then we get to Princeton, which played their game here against Yale this weekend. A tough one. Yale didn't go away on this one. I believe Princeton won 11-10. Yes, 11-10 over Yale. So strong. Shout out to Yale for, again, they have a tough schedule. They've played a pretty good amount of teams here that are, going to be potential Final Four teams. So, shout out to Yale.
So challenging is that everyone is a threat. You can't just forget about anybody because anyone will score.
As Capozzi loses a man and puts it away. And that's what the junior will do for you. Now 9 goals on the season for the former All-Ivy and USILA honorable mention All-American.
And that's freshman or first-year Gaetano Cicatello, who just lost his footing on that inside roll, and Capozzi with very little angle there, but is able to just pick that corner.
Capozzi can get it done on both sides in terms of scoring and facility.
I love that the announcer talked about the angle shot there. You rarely see the inside roll with the outside hand far side post. That was a very interesting goal. But good game here for Princeton. I want to bring up Yale's schedule just really quick because this is what I was mentioning when we were first talking about this. Their losses right now are to Army, Penn State, and Princeton. And Army again faltering. They are completely in the win Patriot League category now. There's no at large for Army anymore. I think. But Princeton, Penn State, Army are Yale's losses, and they hold wins over Fairfield, Boston, which is going to be increasingly a better win for Yale. But kind of turning the page to Princeton here, who is has national championship aspirations. They played pretty strongly in this one. They were up early. Yale just didn't go away. Princeton, other than their first start, their first game where they just kind of came out flat, which. Right. You can't blame them sometimes. I mean, that first game is just kind of get the cobwebs out, all that stuff. They've been just on a roll here, 5-1. Capozzi having 5 points in this one, leading Princeton.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like this is the one thing that's, Yale hardly turned. Princeton was very secure with the ball. Yale hardly turned them over at all in this game, and so it was one that they, if you look at their offensive efficiency, like it was fine, but it's just a weird game when you see like there were hardly any turnovers, and so you'd almost imagine that like in a game like that where you're not turning the ball over, you'd almost say, oh, it's kind of surprising they ended up at 32% efficiency and won by 1 goal. But shout out to the Yale defense, right? Like that's been a big, that's something that they've struggled with in past seasons, and this year has so far looked a lot better. So, that's if they're going to have a possession advantage and the defense is going to play strong, like they can probably get a couple Ivy games and maybe sneak their way into the Ivy League tournament.
Yeah, I don't know what the halftime talk was with Yale, but they only allowed 3 goals in the second half. That allowed them to kind of come back there. So, again, Princeton handling business there. Harvard. I don't have them on the schedule to talk about today. Harvard, oh, well, maybe I do. Harvard, Penn. I don't have any highlights, but they took down Penn. Actually, I do. What the heck? Q, come on, man.
Cut off the outside. Oh, he let him outside again.
On comes Harvard. 7:10 left. Here's the break. A shot up top and a score. Arndt again. First goal of the fourth quarter is a big one to push it back to a 3-goal advantage for the Crimson.
That is an absolute killer for Penn. They had all those possessions and all those shots. They go 10-man. They get an advantage. Arndt gets it inside, ducks under, takes a hit.
All right, shout out to Harvard for pulling this out there. 6-0 here. They are on a roll. Jerry Byrne, the Minister of Defense, taking his team to undefeated status, one of the few undefeated teams remaining here. Give me anything from this one, Zach. I didn't watch. This is one of the few games I didn't watch at all.
Yeah.
I need to start giving Harvard their
their offense. I mean, 12-9 looks. It's if you're just thinking about 6v6 and like what their efficiencies were, like they dominated this game. They were at 43% efficiency. Penn was at 24, right? That's a huge, enormous gap, right? But they were like minus 10 in terms of offensive possessions. And that was their first game that, they've been like generally right around even in terms of possession margin so far this year. They didn't have any games in their first 5 where either team was like, had a big possession advantage. And this one, they were like way, way under. So I don't know. They only won like, what did they win?
23%
of the faceoffs.
Yeah,
that's like a wild stat. And you don't usually see. It's very rare to see a team like win because of an efficiency advantage, win because of a possession advantage. And obviously, we didn't see that in this game. But like that's a huge gap. And I'll be interested to see if they're able to bounce back from a faceoff perspective. Penn's been solid, but even considering that, like that's a really bad faceoff day for Harvard. And it's one of those things that obviously efficiency to me is like the harder thing to be good at. You get a great faceoff guy, you can have a 4-year run of being dominant from a possession perspective. But you look at a Harvard team and it's like, I could easily see them dropping a game here, even if they have a possession edge, if they're going to be, minus 14 in terms of possessions.
Yeah. And I don't know. I would love to see how they cleared the ball. The goalie got them a couple possessions back, obviously 64% from the goalie there, Stevens. So faceoffs. Shout out to Quinn Ball going 84%, 16-19 against Harvard there. It's a fantastic point, Zach. Is this like a one-off for Harvard, or do they actually have an issue here? That is not a stat line that usually you see out of a national champion competitor here.
To think about what's coming up, their next 3 opponents. Dartmouth is currently 17th in adjusted faceoff. Boston is 13th in adjusted faceoff, and then they got Wambach at UNC, who is the top faceoff guy in the country. If they were at, because early in the season they seem to be doing fine from a faceoff perspective, but if they're going to go up and play against those 3 teams like they did against Penn from a faceoff perspective, it's kind of hard to imagine them running that 3-game gauntlet.
Yeah. Hopefully it was just a off day. Maybe he broke up with his girlfriend or something, just having an emotional, stressful week here. One to follow. That's a really great point. That's what I love about this show. We get to kind of dive in kind of behind the scenes. Harvard ranked number 4 here, but if they can't figure out the face-off, it's going to be tough for them to beat the great teams. They have Dartmouth next, which you mentioned. I want to point out, like right now, I think Boston is my Cinderella. Boston is my Cinderella here. Not Georgetown, Not any. What's another Cinderella here? I can't put Ohio State there, although I would love to see them be successful. Who's another Cinderella? Denver, maybe. I'm not going to say that about Hopkins. Anyways, Boston is my team now for the rest of the year. This is the underdog dark horse team. Do you have a dark horse team, Zach? You got it?
Man, I don't know. We could have a show dark horse. You can decide who our dark horse is going to be.
Okay,
but I will say BU. They're now of all the Patriots, and you mentioned Army. Like they're still, if they beat UNC and they run the table and then they lose in the Patriot League finals, like they still have a shot at an at-large. It's definitely a lot lower than it was before. But BU now they're at like 38, 39%. If they don't win the Patriot League and they lose that final to Army, like. They've got Harvard still, so they've got a chance to build something that could be at large worthy.
A two-bid Patriot League. You'd love to see it.
I mean, two-bid A10, two-bid Patriot League is still on the table.
Okay, let's go. We're going to talk bracketology here later in the show. We got UNC here with a big game against Penn State. Penn State has been cardiac cats to a T this year. Their wins are phenomenal. Their losses, not so much. So this was a chance to kind of show, hey, we are who those good victories show we are, but they actually fell now to North Carolina. North Carolina winning 10-8 here on the day.
Up top, Considine shoulders his way in, gets a little room, Twizzler shot, and Marcus shrugs that away. Yeah, the same high school that his coach Dave Petramala attended.
UNC runs a all-freshman second line, which you do not see.
Oh, there. First goal of the game, and it is huge. Little throwback, broken stick for Penn State. Trouble in River City, and it adds up to a goal by Carolina Suchek.
All right, there was some controversy in this game as well. When I first saw the game, I was like, oh my God, I get to see Penn State and UNC this weekend. This is going to be a great matchup. I can't wait to watch it. This should be a nationally televised event. Oh no, it's on the Corrigan Sports Network behind a paywall. And apparently there was some controversy with the announcer, Booker there, having to talk with the refs, but then the refs came out and said, no, there was no talk. But I didn't pay for this. Well, obviously, I'm just like, you can tell I'm against kind of this paywall stuff. Zach, do you know anything about this controversy? Because I didn't watch the game. I don't know how closely the announcer was talking with the refs or anything like that.
Yeah, I didn't watch it, but like I did see the statement that the NCAA put out, and I was like, this is serious business. That like the NCAA is putting out one of those terse, like hostage style statements on social media. So it was, like anything, I assumed that the social media conversation was kind of overblown compared to what actually happened. But yeah, it was a little jarring to see like the NCAA come out and be like, NCAA is like in the middle of March Madness, and like someone in their head office is like, hey, I got to write a social media statement about like Booker Corrigan was not the one that made that replay review, which is just kind of crazy. But hey, it's a colorful sport and colorful things happen.
Yeah, that's fair. Colorful is the best way to talk about what's going on when we can't see a top-ranked matchup again. Something has to change, please. It can't be this way. We saw North Carolina again take down Penn State 10-8. Goalie play was subpar. Face-offs went Wambach's way. Your thoughts on what the data showed here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing, like, this is tongue in cheek, but like if you could have watched it, you could have just watched the Villanova game again. Like statistically, the Penn State offense, their numbers are almost identical to what happened when they played Villanova. And obviously the result was fairly similar. I mean, I think, from a face-off perspective, that's a little bit of a different story, right? Like Carolina really, really did. Wambach has just been dominant this year, and he was dominant in this game. But like, I think we talked about last week, like which Penn State team is going to show up. And it was, I don't think this is one where you'd say like, oh, their offense fixed everything and it was just a possession problem against UNC. Like they really did. I mean, their numbers are, like I said, almost identical to how they played against Villanova when they lost 14-13. So, it's just which offense is going to show up for Penn State. And again, this time it was the bad one. I guess we'll see which one shows up against Maryland next week. But if it's the good one, it's hard to imagine that the Terps are going to hang with them. But if it's the bad one, we could see a blowout the other way. So who knows?
Yeah, talking about North Carolina as well, they're number 5 in the poll. They play Army next week, so I love that you brought up Army's potential at-large resume still being in play here. North Carolina win would do that a ton of good. So that'll be a good matchup to take in next week. We've got Duke at number 6. Again, we've talked a little bit about their schedule. They play Denver. This it's time. They built up this season here. However you want to look at it, it's time to play a potential championship day weekend. I mean, Denver's kind of on the cusp there. I wouldn't call them a Final Four team, but they are on the cusp, and they have been there before. So really,
I mean, the Denver defense has been phenomenal this year, and so that will be a good test. Like I think we're either going to see that like the Denver defense is just beating up on bad offenses. I mean, maybe Duke goes off against them again, or maybe it is. And it's tough, right? Because if Duke wins by 3 goals and it's a 10-7 victory, like that still could be a really effective offensive day, given how good good Denver has been so far. So
are they number 1?
Who, Denver?
Yeah,
by quite a bit.
Okay.
Like this late in the season, like I don't remember number 1 defense being this far ahead. Like we've had some years where Georgetown was like just blowing teams out early. But to get 6 or 7 games in and be as far ahead as they are is pretty impressive. So again, we'll see how that holds up against some of these powerhouses that they're going to play. But we'll learn something this week.
We're going to learn. I mean, this is vindication week for either side here. The Quint Kesnicks of the world that are saying, hey, you go to Duke to play the tough matchups, right, to play the big daddy blue chips, and then also the other side saying, look, they were a great team. Yeah. Look at what they put down. So vindication week for sure. Speaking of Denver, they lost to Ohio State 6-4. They took 14 shots in the whole game. I was watching it up until the end. It was like 3 minutes left. They had taken 14 shots, which I mean you can get 14 goals in a game sometimes. So the absurdity of the shots in this was not lost on me. We've got Ohio State and Denver.
13 of 13 on clearance attempts tonight. Here's a bouncing shot. There's Garrett Haas turning around the cage and going short side that time to double the Buckeyes' lead.
As complex as he plays and how it goes, as good as he is, he makes it look so simple, Garrett Haas. Just very easily makes space for himself, gets around the cage there, and then just dumps one right below the goaltender.
You get a look at it there. Looked like he almost went through the wickets that time.
All right, so a blistering 18 shots for Ohio State. They win 6-4, and yes, Denver ended with 14 here. I don't know. Again, maybe we can look at the stats for shots on goal versus shots. Maybe it was just a bad shooting day. That could be something, but you rarely see a 6-4. I mean, this is a extremely low-scoring game, is all I'll say on it. I mean, 10 goals in a Division I game is insane.
And, I think this is testament to the defenses. These are the top 2 defenses in the country. And, if you look at the shot on goal rates, Ohio State was at 45 and Denver was at 57%. These defenses they did not let those offenses get comfortable. And I always think to me, shot on goal rate is the offense comfortable doing what they want to do? Because if you're doing what you want to do and you're getting the ball to the spots you want to get it to, you're going to put shots on net. The fact that they didn't you just get the feel that these were just 2 offenses that just could never get comfortable. They were just flustered the whole day. And that's a shout out to these defenses that definitely lived up to their billing in this one.
All right. JJ saying Grayson Manning, the brick wall. The goalie play was stellar in this one. Caleb Fyock actually beating out Manning. Fyock had 71% on his save percentage. He was, 10 saves to 4 against there, and Manning 12 for 6 here, or 12 shots, 6 goals against 12 shots, 67%. So some good stuff here. Garrett Haas is obviously legit. He was leading Ohio State there with 3 points. And we'll see what Denver's made of here today. They have a game literally today against Syracuse. This is going to be a fantastic one. Any last thoughts on, because we're not going to touch much on Q's. They did take down Air Force, but anything on this Q's Denver game here tonight?
No, I mean, it's, this was one that I was looking, and there's definitely some knock-on effects from this one. Let me see if I can grab those. But it was one of those where I think you got Hopkins and Maryland on one side that are really pulling for cues, given that they played them, and then on the other side, you've got Ohio State, which is really sitting there rooting for a Denver victory. So there's almost some Big Ten fratricide going on with this one, that you've got half of the conference that's rooting for one team and half the conference is rooting for another. So definitely some knock-on effects resume-wise in this one.
All right, we've got the next three are essentially Qs, which, again, sitting at number 8. Penn State, who we've already touched on. They play Maryland coming up this week. And then Cornell taking down Brown. They've got Princeton. So that's going to be a solid slate of games there this weekend. I don't have anything for Cornell. Do you have anything, Cornell, quickly before we move on to this Maryland UVA?
I mean, they're a tricky one, right? Because their season has not been up to the standard from last year. Obviously, you lose Kirsten, that's not surprising. But from an ELO perspective, they're still up there, number 2 or 3 team in the country, just in terms of that forward-looking program strength. So the projections really like their chances to kind of close strong. We'll see if that happens. And I think that's one of the places that ELO can struggle when you have a giant change in personnel from year to year. So we'll see.
Oh, did we lose? Okay, we're still here, right?
We're still here.
Okay, I thought we lost him.
But we're still here.
I'm fuzzy. Okay, here we go. God dang it. All right.
Oh, there you go. You're back.
Yeah. All right, what do you got here? You pulled up. Is this me or is this you? That's me? Okay, so yeah, all right, we're having some issues here. Zach, can you give me anything on Goldstein from Cornell? Because when the All-American preseason All-American list came out, I was a Goldstein hater on this one. I said you cannot make a dude who sat behind Kirst and did not draw any of the first line polls here, or the number 1 polls. You can't make this guy a preseason All-American. Right. How is he doing this year? How do I stick a crow in my mouth, or what's the situation?
Well, I mean, 66th percentile for efficiency, right? So that's almost exactly where he was last season, right? So I think it's one of those things that, shout out to him. He's kind of weathered the fact that he's getting a lot more attention from the opposing defenses, and he's still, doing just as well as he did last year. What is interesting is his play share has not been higher. He's actually lower this year. He's and I don't know if that's just early season quirks of them kind of playing some games where he didn't have to do as much, but he's actually been less of a factor in their offense than he was a year ago, which is surprising.
Well, I think when I think about the game inside the lines there, when you get the number 1 defender, a lot of times you're talking about it that week, hey, this isn't the matchup.
Yeah.
The matchup is somewhere else, whereas Goldstein would have been the matchup last year. Maybe when a Kirst is drawing a Schouler and Goldstein's drawing a whoever the heck it is. Right. I hate to talk smack on any guys who aren't the number 1 defender on their team. I get there's a lot of talented dudes over there across the country that are drawing the number 2 matchup. But yeah, I think that might have a lot to do with it. Hey, if you got a Jack Stahl, we're gonna probably attack something else today.
Right.
So, anyways,
but I think that what's been interesting is Firth has been the sort of the fulcrum for them. Right now, when he's scored 3 or more goals, Firth that is, they're 4-0, and when he's scored less than 3 goals, they're 0-2, and the efficiency gap between those two scenarios is 15 percentage points. So when Firth has been strong and he's been able to do it, and I think this is probably to your point, right? Defenses are trying to lock down Goldstein. When Firth's been able to get going and kind of say, okay, well, if you're not going to focus on me, I'm going to go off. They've been great. They've been solid. The games where he hasn't been able to, they've really struggled. So, I think it's one of those things that Goldstein has been consistent. Firth's been the guy that has been the sort of the bellwether for them. And it's, I think so it seems like how they go the rest of the year is probably going to be based on how well Firth is able to kind of live in that void where all the attention's on Goldstein.
Got it. I love it. And in that kind of push-pull too, right? If Firth continues to kind of do really well, maybe that shifts a little bit of the focus towards him. Maybe it takes a little bit off. It's just that balance. But anyways, we had a 3 OT game. UVA just can't. It's just not working. I don't know what it is. And, shout out to them. I mean, Maryland's a very strong team. This isn't a pushover here, even though they've had 3 losses here early in the season. This is the number 11 ranked team in the country. And they went to triple OT with Maryland and the Terps there. But yeah, UVA losing another one, 13-12.
It was this man, Leo Johnson, who did that. On the exchange, Whittier turns. He scores! This spine tingler is over. And Maryland downs Virginia.
All right, big win for the Terps there. I almost felt bad, though. I mean, like when you look at like who needed this win more, I think even though, which is crazy to say when you look at a Maryland team that had lost, I believe, 3 in a row. Virginia needed this win more. They were right there at the cusp, and they lost this one in OT. But you got an interesting graphic here. What's up?
Yeah, that's, I mean, and given, I think you're right. Like this game, if Virginia had won it, the sky's the limit. I mean, I don't want to say sky's the limit, but like, could you just imagine what the UVA faithful were feeling when that win probability was down there, where they were at like, almost 85% to win the game, and then to have like that tense overtime, and all of a sudden, it ends with a Maryland victory. Like, overtime lacrosse and overtime hockey are just so stressful, and it's just, I agree with you. Like, if imagine what the feeling would be like in Charlottesville if that Hopkins lead had not disappeared. And if they had been the one to get this overtime game, like it's just, the statistics would be exactly the same for their season, but the feelings would be just completely flipped.
100%. I'm looking at the specialist play here. Virginia not doing as well on the faceoff side of things. Henry Metz took the majority here, going 35%. Dodge for Maryland went 67%. So I believe the faceoffs went their way. Goalie play has been an issue. 41% is not going to kill you. I mean, it's not like in the 30s, but it's not great from Merrick there, the goalie from Virginia. I heard an interesting story, Zach, about the goalie from Virginia. I can't say it's completely true, but this guy was not even a recruit for UVA. He was on campus, and Lars met this guy for coffee after hearing that this guy was on campus. And I don't think it was like an instant you're a starter, but this is how the guy ended up on the team, Merrick, and now is the starting goalie for UVA. And you think about that, and you're like, if that's the situation for a blue blood like UVA, it's very apparent that recruiting hasn't gone their way when a story like that is being told.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because I think the flip side is like recruiting, it can be such a crapshoot. Like, who knows how good these guys are coming out of high school? I mean, it's just tough. You get these rankings and all that sort of thing, and it's like, you could look at it two ways. You could look at it and say, huge win for the UVA program that they've got the feelers out to find this guy in a coffee shop who could be their starting goalie. But I mean, I think if there's a truth to this, you're probably right. It's probably not a great sign that they're having to pluck a goalie out of a coffee shop.
Yeah. Number 11, Maryland here. This does a lot to kind of ease their whole situation of losing 3 in a row for the first time since God knows when. Your thoughts on Maryland here? They take on Penn State this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of feels like the sort of thing where there's nothing stopping them from having a really successful rest of their season, right? There's no goal that they have that's not still in reach, but it just doesn't feel great to have them win a game against UVA in overtime, a game where they had a 10% win probability at one point, right? So, I guess you look at that and say, again, everything is in reach. There's nothing they can't do. But I don't think you come away with this feeling a lot better than you did going in.
Yeah.
All right. Especially with the Schaller injury, right? I mean, if that's something where he's going to be out the rest of the year, then you probably feel worse about yourself after.
I will check Twitter while we're live here just to make sure we didn't get any breaking news. I know we have some folks watching live. Appreciate you guys joining us. If you guys have any info, please drop that in the comment section as well. And also JJ saying, Merrick went to UVA nursing school and got the call. So we're getting a little bit of a confirmation on that story that I heard. Let me check Will Schaller here and see if anything has come out. He would have taken a MRI here either yesterday or today. While I'm doing that, we have a Hopkins Navy here to get. This was the first time that I heard Zach talk about a must-win. Hopkins, with their remaining schedule, they had to beat this Navy team, who's a good team, solid team. Hayashi finally got it together there at the face-off as well. Let me play this highlight here, and then let's talk a must-win for Hopkins.
Here today, we'll get that number for you in just a moment. Now, turnaround shot here by Gregoric, doesn't go. Save by Jelinas.
Yeah, a little bit of a force there.
Chavette, transition, feeds it up. Shot and a score for the Blue Jays and Eiler again. It's all Charlie Eiler here today right now for the Blue Jays, Coach.
Yeah, he's having an unbelievable day. You know, I would imagine one of the best days he's had in his time here at Hopkins. Great opportunistic play there for Johns Hopkins in the clear. They recovered the ball, threw the ball down the field to Shaw.
All right, extremely talented Hopkins team. When you watch this team, it kind of reminds me of UNC. I mean, they just have talent all over the field. Offensive talent is crazy. I mean, it felt like Navy, who has a strong defense and is just a really well-coached team. I mean, they were just holding on, trying to keep up with these talented Dodgers from Hopkins. What do you got here from Hopkins?
Yeah, so this was not necessarily like okay, you can take your foot off the gas. I think they're still in must-win mode, right? Like, I think, if you look at the bubble, they're still the number one team in terms of most likely to be kind of first in or last out. But, they did take a step, and obviously this doesn't affect the conference seeding at all. But, it was a step forward, and it was a game they had to have, and they're still sitting in that scenario where if they get to 9 victories, including the conference tournament, they're going to feel really, really good about where they're at. I can't remember what we were talking about last week and what that number was for the 8 victories, but right now, if they end up with 8, they're looking at about a 40% chance of getting into the dance. So, it was a game they had to have. I don't think it necessarily changes the math and how we think about them. Like, the games that they play in the Big Ten are really going to decide how far they're able to go and what their profile is. But as of right now, they did what they had to do and live to fight another day.
All right, I've got the schedule here. I'm trying to pull it up. Apologies, we're having some issues with the back end here. They've got Michigan next. These were the 2 must wins, like Zach was talking about. They took care of one with Navy. Michigan is Rutgers a must win for them?
I mean, it's a little bit of a double trouble because like Rutgers is a team that you look at with what they've done so far, and they're going to be in the mix for an at-large if they are able to win some of these Big Ten games. I mean, that's so there's no way that's a play-in game right this early in the season. But I think if you're Rutgers and Hopkins, I think you're going to feel a lot better about your chances because a win is going to help your resume against a team that is potentially going to be sitting there as one of those bubble teams as well. So those just have twice as much importance given that, a win is also a loss for a bubble rival.
All right. Georgetown, number 13 here, took down UAlbany 16-8. It wasn't close. Albany, one of the kind of dark horses coming into the season. They're having a tough one. Denver here, we've already talked about them. Boston, my Terriers, as I'll call them, the remaining of the season. They took down Army. This was a good win for them in the Patriot League.
Screen in front. Oh, Forte came open for a minute. Shanahan's got the second chance. Make it a Hattie for T.
It's about second chance plays sometimes. And
all right, so they took down Army here 10-8. Nice Patriot League matchup, man. That's one of my favorite out of the big kind of 3 or 4, whatever you want to talk about. Just some really awesome teams in that. Boston quickly becoming a contender here at number 15.
I mean, the nice thing for them is right now they're at like 85% to be the top seed in the Patriot League. And so, that just has all kinds of benefits in terms of who they're going to not have to play and all that sort of stuff. So, right now, definitely looking like they've got the inside track. But that it'll be interesting because, like you said, that loss to Yale it's going to be maybe a feather in the cap for the Elis. But I don't know. It's you look at Boston. I think we talked about this last week. Like to some extent, like do they get the Patriot League AQ is interesting. Is there something that suggests that they might be able to get a victory in the NCAA tournament if they get there? Is kind of always the big outstanding question for these types of teams.
If they beat, although Holy Cross is having a good season, if Boston beats Harvard, And again, don't overlook. I mean, Colgate's having a really down year, so they'll probably deal with Colgate pretty well. But when you look at Boston's schedule, if they beat Harvard, they could run the table the rest of the way. Yeah.
I mean,
Really
there's no league in which I feel less confident that a team that looks like they could run the table will in fact run the table than a Patriot League team, right? Like that's just every time you think this Army, certainly they're going to cruise through the Patriot League tournament and get that AQ, and it never happens. Like this is just one of my favorite leagues.
All right, look, Army's at 16, right behind Boston here. Then we finish out with Rutgers, St. Joe's, Penn, and Towson. Anything on those 4 teams that are rounding out the top 20 here?
Yeah, I mean, I think these are always interesting just in terms of like, do they end up as a quality win for somebody else? And right now, like Army's got in this last sim, they had about a 38% chance of having a top 10 RPI, which, is not where you were hoping to be if you were an Army fan, even just a couple weeks ago. So, it's the thing we always say with them is like, well, it doesn't really matter what their resume is like because they just got to go win the Patriot League. And, I'm sure if BU and Army meet in the Patriot League final, it's going to be a great game. So it's, they're kind of a similar boat to Maryland where the vibes aren't great, but everything's still in front of them. And, if they can kind of rekindle some of that magic, then who knows about Army.
All right, folks, we got through the top 20 media poll here on a Monday. Appreciate you joining us. We have about 5 minutes left in this show. We're going to talk some efficiency, so just kind of taking a deep dive here at some teams and some players here. And if we do want to talk about some other schedules as we kind of make our way through, we already talked about Duke here and there. Actually, surprisingly, strong RPI, strength of schedule that they've been playing. But let's jump into it, Zach.
Yeah, so this is the efficiency matrix, right? And so what we're trying to do here is plot all the offenses and all the defenses. So this is ignoring, specialists and possession advantage and that sort of thing. If you're the best if the best teams are up and to the right, because you've got Harvard sitting there as the best defense, or Denver is the best defense by quite a bit. And I don't have it on here, but one of the things that I've seen people do with these, which I think is pretty interesting, is just draw those diagonal lines because that kind of separates teams into tiers. And so, like, I think what you're seeing on this is right now, if there's an efficiency tier 1, it's Harvard, right? I mean, they're the only team. They're one of the top defenses, and then they've been the top offense so far. And then you've got this second tier that's kind of Duke, Notre Dame, and Richmond. And then a third tier, depending on how generous you want to get, is sort of Denver, Q's, Princeton, and Penn State. And then there's a bunch of other teams that kind of fall into a lower tier. And I think it's probably a good way to think about this thing. And the flip side is when you look at this in basketball, for example, possessions are the same, right? You have the same number of possessions as your opponent. Lacrosse, obviously, a little bit trickier because we talked about Harvard, where if those face-off numbers are going to look like they did last game, that's going to be a big Achilles heel for them.
Mm-hmm.
But just in terms of the 6v6 stuff, like they definitely have been a head and shoulders above kind of where everybody else is. And I would say it's fair to say that they're in a tier alone. So now again, like, does that mean that they're going to go and win the rest of their games? Especially not if they have that face-off struggle. Like, no, it doesn't. But I do think as you start to kind of formalize in your brain who are the real contenders, this is a pretty good way to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty big headline there. You're talking about Harvard being in a tier of their own, essentially, tier 1, where a lot of people are obviously placing Notre Dame. Notre Dame, in Richmond and Duke, did you mention being in that tier 2?
Yeah, Notre Dame, Richmond, Duke, I would say is probably tier 2 at this point.
Yeah, you can kind of see that play out there on the obviously the matrix here. So this is good stuff, man. I appreciate it. Anybody that stands out here that's not like ranked, it looks like is that the Utes? I really can't. Yeah, Utah.
Utah. I mean, and again, like that next tier is probably like Ohio State, Army, Utah, Jacksonville, Hopkins, Georgetown, even UNC falls in there. So, I think like Maryland is one that probably stands out a little bit just in terms of like we don't usually expect to see them where they are, right, kind of down there in the middle bottom. Georgetown similarly, right? Like their team that typically is up at the top of the defensive numbers. So, but I mean, the Utah showing up there, I mean, they're looking like one of the 10 best 10 or 12 best defenses, and we always hear about Steins and what that offense can do. But the Utah defense has been having a pretty solid season. So, if you think about the ASUN and who's going to come out of there, like that bodes well for their chances.
I've been experimenting more and more with my team here locally with the 10-man. And, the McMinn and Utah are one of the, main practitioners of the 10-man. And I wonder how that protects your defense as opposed to leave it exposed, right? You obviously get like goals off of that, but it could potentially kind of switch the tide of you not having to play that much defense and leading to that. But
interesting thing is like this is excluding failed clears. So like to the extent that they're able to, this is only once the other team is getting that clear successfully into their offensive end. So, you add that on top of it, and, to the extent that leads to a little bit of a possession or not, I mean, it does lead to a possession advantage for them. It's another feather in that cap.
There you go. All right, folks. Any last talk here on maybe some players, Zach, that we can touch on?
We're a little light on the frontier this week. Typically we have 7 or 8 guys on here, but there were just some really strong performances. And the way the frontier works is that, a really good performance can basically eliminate a bunch of other ones from the list. And I think that's probably what we saw here to an extent. But obviously, Kurtla from Rutgers has been a guy that he's had the stats. We haven't talked about him yet this year. But his game against St. John's was just really uber efficient. I mean, 11 points, only 1 turnover. Villagomez from Towson. I mean, he's been, we talked about Roussel last week a lot in terms of the mighty might game he had. But Villagomez has been a great guy. And so for them, they've got that sort of 3-headed monster of Weishar, Villagomez, and Roussel. And I think it's funny. You think of Towson hard-nosed defense, but like their offense has been really effective.
Got some players.
So shout out to him for the game he had against Villanova. Firth, we talked about him, right? I mean, he had that great game against Brown, and if he's going to be able to do that type of thing going forward, the sky's the limit for them on offense. And so it's just interesting. I'd love to see the game plans against Cornell and how much is Firth the guy that people are thinking about. And you want to have a plan for Goldstein, but if your plan for Goldstein lets Firth run wild, that's not going to work out very well for you. And that's what he was able to do against Brown. Haley for Navy, I mean, he's another guy, and like he kind of deflated that Jacksonville bubble a little bit. And it's not a huge stat line in terms of, he had 4 goals and 2 turnovers, but the efficiency, I mean, it was not on a lot of touches. And so his efficiency was really, really rock solid against them.
Love it.
Grant from Marquette, I mean, shout out to him. I mean, it was not a game Marquette, Utah won the game, but you don't love to see 5 turnovers. Kyle Devitt would tell me he had 0 Devitts in this game because his turnovers, as many turnovers as he had points. But given the strength of the Utah defense, that's not anything to sniffle at. So solid game for Carson Brandt from Marquette as well.
All right, love that breakdown, Zach. We have some games tonight. Obviously, our one game tonight, Syracuse and Denver. This Saturday, we're going to see some matchups. Utah, Virginia is probably one to watch out. Although, as you know, the UVA bubble kind of deflates a little bit. We'll see exactly. Is there a way UVA can still get into the tournament? I mean, there's a ton of games left. If they
yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the thing to remember with them is that, like, think about the games they have to play, right? Or get to play. Like, if you're thinking about kind of building a resume, they get to play some really, really good teams, and that's a great way to build a resume. So I think it's one of those things like, will they? In the simulation that I ran, like they were less than 1%. They're not showing up on my chart. They're not dead because I think I still saw them on the bracketology as work to do. But they're under 1% at this point. So they have the opportunities, but I think the model is looking at what they've done so far and it's just saying, but it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to take advantage of them.
So we've got Michigan, Hopkins, another must-win. When you look at the remainder of Hopkins' schedule, Michigan is a must-win for them. Cornell, Princeton will be a great game. Shout out to Kyle Hayes, the offensive assistant over at LIU. LIU's having a pretty strong season here. They're 5-1. They'll probably take care of business here, although I don't want to give them
LIU, number 20 in the computer rankings. That's the first time they've been on there this season. So shout out to the Sharks.
6-1 here. They've got maybe Mercyhurst is probably there. They got a Robert Morris on the schedule, but they could run the table, man. We'll see how they look as the season kind of progresses. And then any other games here that we want to touch on? Hampton Watch not happening this week. Sorry, fellas. They're going to lose to Queens there. They lost to Fairfield this week. Richmond, UMass, no. Ohio State, Rutgers.
I'm interested in that one, right? Because that's, Rutgers is a team that's still hanging around potential bubble territory. And so you look at them, and it's the kind of game that if they're really going to make some noise, that's one I don't want to say have to have, but that would be a nice win for them.
Yeah, Army, North Carolina, Maryland, Penn State to round that out. Any tough games. And then Sunday. This is what you have to be looking out for, folks, because next Monday we're going to be sitting here on the show, and it's going to be validation for either Zach here with Duke talking about their schedule, or the folks that say no, it was not a tough enough schedule, and that's why they lost to Denver. But that Denver Duke game happening on Sunday in Durham, right down the road, and then Georgetown Syracuse at the same time. Great, that's awesome. Good job, guys, on that schedule. Perfect. Appreciate you joining us. This was College Lacrosse Live. Any last thoughts, Zach, and then we'll head out of here.
Oh, man, good luck. Hopefully this storm doesn't put us out of commission.
I'm hoping it doesn't, man. I'm not getting anything outside the window now, but I could see the trees are swaying. So, yeah. All right, man. Appreciate you very much. Appreciate you guys at home. Either you tuned in while live or afterwards. We see you guys, and we'll be here next week. Thank you.
Enjoy the week.